In times of trauma and adversity, we must create space for connection by sharing a story of hope. Welcome to Humans of Hope, Inspiring Stories, hosted by Kerry Atherton. This podcast shares inspiring stories of individuals who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger, offering hope and resilience to listeners all over the world. Join Kerry, the founder of Stories of Hope Worldwide, every week to hear these remarkable journeys and find the strength to overcome your adversity. Now, let's listen in to this week's conversation.
I'm Kerry Atherton and I'm your host. And today's guest is Dave Graham, also known as Farmer Dave, and most of you will also know him as Dave from Big Brother. Welcome, Dave.
G'day, thanks for having me. And yes, I go by all of those AKAs, yes.
And you know, you're a real all-round good bloke as well. I've been doing a bit of stalking and you do amazing work with troubled youth. You've got a real desire to stand up for the people in society that are rejected for different reasons. And you've also survived a lot of near-death experiences, fallen out of a plane, broken nearly every bone in your body. We've got a lot to talk about, haven't we?
Yeah, let's do it.
But today we're also going to be talking about a topic that is really close to both of our hearts, and that is your struggle with alcoholism, which you've really only recently started talking about in public.
Yeah. All the isms, I suppose. It's one of those things that it takes a long time for you to acknowledge and then accept. You know, we all know the classic alcoholic can't meet his issues head on until he actually admits to himself that he's got a problem. And with any ism, it's the same thing. You can't fix it until you admit to yourself that you've got it. And any issue at all, you're not going to sort out your eating habits. You're not going to sort out anything at all that's going on and is detrimental to your life unless you actually admit to yourself that you've got it. And it took me a long time to realise the penny drop or accept that I actually had an issue with isms.
Yeah, wow. So 44 years, hey? Because you've been sober for 9 months.
Yes, in AA for 9 months now, and just 9 months and 1 week. I went into rehab, and I suppose it took a 5-week in-hospital program to really accept what I had. And, you know, I was one of those people that went in there as a workaholic, suffering extreme burnout, and then realised, hey, I've got all this other stuff going on. And I suppose the biggest revelation that I had in there was I didn't have this perfect life that I'd convinced myself that I'd had. And you get so caught up in the storytelling that your life is perfect. And, you know, as you've suggested, I work with troubled youth. And I suppose the biggest story that I've always had is I had such a privileged life. It's my duty to give assistance and give guidance and be that safety net for young people that have not had a privileged life. But when you unpack it, as I did in rehab, I realized it wasn't privileged. It was the opposite of privilege. And I had a really horrendous childhood. And I suppose I just made so many coping mechanisms, the isms, to get through. And they were all survival mechanisms. They were things that I'd built up and I'd learned from a very young age how to cope. And it was the emotional armor that I had. And rehab allows you to unpick that. And AA allows you to build yourself back up with a fellowship of people around you going through this same stuff, who are walking the same path. Some like you, well down the path that can give that older sober member guidance. But at the end of the day, we all acknowledge from a very humble place that we know nothing, but we are just doing it one step at a time. And I think that that's the golden solution. That's the golden way that is AA, that it's one step at a time. No one has all the answers. And it's something that you've got to come to on your own realization. So that's where I'm at almost 45.
Oh, and congratulations, because it's a massive step. You know, that first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And accepting that is just such a big step it's the biggest step of the journey of sobriety, isn't it? And I had to accept that at 18.
I don't know how you did that.
I don't either.
Yeah, I just look at any of these young people that are in rehab and even the young kids that I work with and go, I could never do what I'm asking of you, or I could never do what I'm seeing you do right now, which is in such a youthful part of the experience of life, actually being able to say, I can't do this.
Yeah, it was massive. And I was like one of the three youngest people in the rooms. And I thought to myself, Brig, my life is over. You know, I've got to go to AA for the rest of my life. And everyone else is out partying, drinking, and this is my life. And as exciting as it might get, I might go to the movies on a Saturday night or something like that. And so it was really hard. And it was hard to find those similarities of the other speakers that they tell you when you go into the rooms of AA, look for the similarities and not the differences. But I just hung on to whatever similarities I could find because I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. And it got down to death or sobriety for me.
That's insane though, that Kerry, that happened at such a young age for you, that realization, but then the ability to have the honest, willing acceptance, right? Like that idea that it's like, well, it is one or the other. Whereas so many other young people are like, no. Oh, I'm different. What was it that made you realize I need to enter these rooms? Because you said that you walked in at 16 and then you accepted when you were 18. Like what happened in that period for you that allowed you to be so damn adult?
I think a lot more trauma based on top of the trauma that I'd been through as a kid. And one of those things involved being molested by a pedophile when I was 9 on holidays. At 10, I had a breakdown and I was put on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. And a lot of bullying going on at school and not being able to predict the atmosphere at home because my mum and dad were alcoholics. My mum was an active alcoholic till I was 12. And then at 17, I was raped. I was in violent relationships and just the continual trauma to myself and the situations that I'd been exposed to, the people that I'd let into my life, the self-hatred, the shame. I just couldn't live with it. I didn't know how to live with that anymore. And it just emotionally, the journey just got too much for me. And the only way out for me was suicide. But there was another way out because I heard a loud voice say, don't do it. If you hang on a bit longer, you'll find happiness one day. And having been into the rooms of AA, I knew that there was one other last step, and that was committing to the process of getting sober. So that was kind of like my rock bottom. Yep. But I was listening to a podcast that you shared with someone else, and you talked about the fact that you've had this wonderful ability to accept things in life, and that came from seeing a serenity prayer in your house when you were young. And we had that serenity prayer in our house because my dad had been sober since before I was born, and my mum was on the journey of sobriety, so I love that serenity prayer. Tell us about that in your home and at that young age, how it had an impact on you that's carried you through really to be able to help you through many situations in life, Dave.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. Grew up in a big old Queenslander, the century-old up on stumps buildings on the side of a river out in the outback, and every room and every hallway had that serenity prayer above it. Like you'd go through a precipice and above it, Mum would have that serenity prayer. And, wherever you'd wash your hands, the prayer would be there. Like we're talking dozens of these prayers. And
no escaping them.
No escaping it. And yet I think it was subliminally put in my head. And it's extraordinary that there was so much. And I suppose it comes from a place of, my parents are both children of alcoholics, and they're much older. My parents are from before the Second World War. Dad was born in the beginning of the Depression, so they're from a very different era to most of my contemporary kids. Like my parents are the same age as most of my when I was growing up, friends' grandparents.
Oh,
so
wow.
they were very, very different and very distant in comparison to the normal parent-child, and I'm the 11th as well, so there was a big distance between your normal loving parent to child relationship because it was more of, there's just so much distance, I suppose, and yet that serenity prayer was always in my head. And I think that's what allowed me to get all the way to 45 before I realized I was so far over the cliff and I had that rope. And as you say, you get to the point of there is two things you can do with that rope. Three things really. Like you can let go and just let the terrible things happen to you and death come that way, or you can get the rope and put it around your neck and actively invite the end, or you can just grasp it and one by one get the hell back over the cliff. And that's definitely where I was at 44, was very much so. I was well and truly over the cliff. Like I'd bounced around that rock bottom and I was way over the cliff's edge. But I reckon that what allowed me to keep being able to deal with horrendous things through life was that serenity prayer. There was so much magic in acceptance.
Yeah.
And the courage, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, that idea of being aware of the present and the serenity that comes from being in the present, be it a sunrise, be it a sunset, or be it a touch of another human being, or the presence of another human being, or, where I find serenity, and that is in the relationship with a dog.
Oh, I know. And we'll get into that shortly. I really want to talk about the power of animals and the role that they played in the work that you did with young people.
Before we go on, that serenity prayer, I've got to say that needs to be in every household. It's not, for me, it's not a Christian thing. It's not a denominational thing. It is a roadmap for being able to keep going. And what I would say to every listener right now is if you don't have a serenity prayer in your house, print it out, buy it online, just get it up. And if you've got children, or if you've got yourself, or if you've got other members of the house, just put it above a doorway, or do what my mum did, have it above every doorway and every hallway you possibly can, because it matters and it makes a massive, massive difference. Certainly did for me.
Dave, a lot of people don't know the serenity prayer. And so I was going to ask you to share it, but I thought, how about we share it together? Because for people that don't know what happens in the 12-step rooms, at the end of every meeting, we hold hands and we connect with one another and we actually say this. So let's say it, Dave. God, grant me the serenity.
To accept the things
that cannot change.
Courage
to change.
Courage to change the things I can. And wisdom to know the difference.
And that's what it is. And the time delay on the computer.
Oh, simple, right?
To say it in sync, but we.
We were so not in sync. But you're up there in Queensland, and I'm down here in
I know,
right? In Sydney. No, we live in the paradise that we create, right? But that serenity prayer has got everything that you could possibly need to get by every moment. It really is. But I think you knocked addiction, alcoholism, all the isms on the head when you said we say that prayer and we connect.
Yeah.
Connection is the antithesis of all of these issues. Alcoholism, addiction, it's not sobriety. Sobriety is not the opposite of addiction. Connection is the opposite of addiction.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing that you get from AA or any of the fellowships, is a connection with others, but it's not a connection of power imbalance. And I think, as you've said in your journey, these power imbalances of rape and abuse and these horrendous things that happen to us when we're small people, there is always this power imbalance. Whereas in the rooms, we sit in a circle, no one in front, no one behind, everyone's beside. And that's true connection, which is the antidote for all of our ills, which is we can connect as equals. We're not looking at that parent-child relationship, that master-servant relationship. We're on a journey together. And once you accept that connection, you really can do anything, because you're no longer alone.
That's it. You're not alone. And that is massive, isn't it? especially for the person that feels so ashamed.
Oh, God,
Sh- sh-
shame the killer.
I know. And I think sitting in those AA meetings or a meeting, even the Stories of Hope events that I run, where there's a no judgment agenda, it's a safe place where people just feel that they're accepted right where they're at in life, regardless of their beliefs. I actually have a no political, no business, no religious agenda at my Stories of Hope events. And even though we do talk about a higher power in the 12-step rooms, that looks so different for everyone and everyone accepts that. And so there's no...
Yeah, it's the hardest thing to get your head around, right?
Yeah.
This whole idea of, oh, that's a Christian thing or that's a religious thing. It is something that you can really only accept when you hit rock bottom, because it's like, what else is there? But I reckon the easiest way to explain it and the way that I allow it to work for me is I can hear my own thoughts. I can have all these conversations and I can watch my thoughts and I can have conversations. And it's like there's a separate being within me and I have a duty, and it's like I can care for this carcass that I have, but I can also care for that little kid that was hurt and all those lives that I've had and those experiences that are part of me. There's a duty of care, and it's you separate yourself away from your own self, and that's that disconnection that you can have. Maybe it's the ego that you're breaking apart, but that's kind of how you start to get this journey of higher power and understanding of it, as opposed to a religious higher power, that there is something else that you can rely on that is no longer just yourself.
Yeah.
It's very complex, but it's something that only happens, I think, for humans when you smash yourself down to rock bottom. And it's as though you're in this deep, dark cavern and suddenly shit makes sense.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. Oh, Dave, can you tell us a little bit about the young Dave that you just mentioned? Because I just want to go back first. You used to tell yourself that you had an idyllic childhood. And look, I hear this as a counsellor for a long time. I hear this all the time. A lot of people come in and, I've got this going on. I'm battling with this addiction, that addiction. And I said, can we talk a little bit about, I had a great childhood. And then when we start to, talk a little bit, then they start to think, oh, hang on a sec, maybe I really didn't. But it's the story that we tell ourselves, because we don't know any different, do we? I mean, we do know that the kid down the road, well, their parent's not an alcoholic, or, I don't think that's happened to them, but you don't know because you don't talk about it, and we hide the secrets. And we carry the shame, the veil of shame.
The veil of shame becomes sometimes that thick. Yeah, it's the emotional armor that we just keep covering ourselves in. But little Dave, he covered himself in that much emotional armor that he thought he could do absolutely anything, and went around the world and did that many crazy things, and was in that many car accidents, horse accidents, cliff accidents, with different armies and trapped in different jails around the world, and, was doing things that only happens in movies because he had so much emotional armor, because he didn't have a great childhood. I mean, I talk about going to boarding school from the age of 9. How privileged is that? And going to the best boarding schools in Queensland, and growing up on a beautiful station and living in the bush and having a carefree life and being able to journey and learn to live off the land for days at a time. But the reality is, the reason I was living off the land for days at a time is because I would be left on the station to walk home. And, sometimes that walk home is 25 kilometres. And, when you're 4 and 5 years of age, walking 25 kilometres through bush, and then, you got to go over a major highway, and the fear that you have, especially in the 1980s, about being kidnapped, and you just constant state of fear for whatever it was, a couple of days sometimes to get back home. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't a once or twice in my childhood. It was every other week or month. I'd be left up at the farm because my father would just either forget about me or get too busy doing stuff around the station, or he'd actively just go, nah, little shit, he's too slow, and just would leave me.
Wow.
And and so I thought it was a privilege knowing how to go without food and, to be able to just eat bush tucker, to be able to survive. Because oftentimes I would be left on a tractor for days as a little kid.
No.
And and I thought it was normal. And I absolutely
that's
just
the thing.
being astounded.
You're normal, isn't it? You're normal. Yeah.
Yeah. And like sleeping with dogs, I mean, the punishment was to go and have to sleep with the dogs in the dog kennels, which is, 150 odd yards away from the house. And the dogs would either be on chains or inside up off the ground kennels if there was snakes or dingoes were around. And I would literally just sleep in there with the dogs. And you think about it now, putting a kid who's 5 in a cage with dogs to sleep at night, like I thought that was a privilege. I thought I was lucky to be able to sleep with the dogs.
Wow.
But I could never imagine, and I've got five kids myself, and I could never imagine what any human could think putting a kid in a cage with dogs and then saying that you don't get to come out until I let you out. Stuff like that where you are just so full of fear all the time, and the fear, you never get a break from the fear because there's no one there that's going to just hug you and say that it's okay.
Yeah.
But that's what I get to do as an adult now. I go back to that little day and I go, hey, I'm here. I'm with you. You're okay. And there's an absolute peace in that, being able to go back to that little kid and say that, because I lived my life thinking that was absolutely normal.
Yeah.
And, spraying chemicals when you're 8 years of age, or being in a tractor that doesn't have an air conditioner but has a closed cab. My father would say to me, look, we didn't have air conditioners when I was a kid, but, you would have open cabs. So I'd be in a cab where it'd get up to 70 degrees in a closed cab. And if ever I opened the door, dust would come into the cab, and my dad would beat the shit out of me if there was dust in the cab. So it was either open the door and get air in so I could survive, but I was literally always just drenched. I'd always be driving the tractor in my undies. Yeah. And this is all from the age of 5 and 6.
Oh.
So
I'm going to give little Dave a hug right now.
Yeah. Little Dave didn't have a great privileged childhood.
Yeah.
And the reason little Dave went to boarding school is because my mum, I think, as much as she didn't do what I would think is enough to stop the barbaric treatment of a little kid, she knew that getting me off to boarding school would be one way of stopping the barbaric treatment of a little kid.
Yeah, right.
But it was never okay. It's not okay now. And it was never okay then. I just think that my parents were doing the best they could. They'd had 11 kids, crikey Moses. They'd, been breeding kids for that long that suddenly they had this other one that come along, and there was a big gap between me because there was some dead babies that happened. So there was a big gap between me and the kids above me. It was just a lot easier just to do something with him, get him to work, because they'd already been through all the little child rearing thing, and they already had grandkids my age. And I was just kind of this annoying thing for them, which I get from their point of view. It's not their fault. Like, it's absolutely, my parents are blameless, absolutely blameless, but it still happened.
Yeah.
And I've got to be the person that is okay with making it okay for that little kid that still exists inside myself.
I love that. And that's why it's so important, isn't it, to do that work, to change those perceptions and step out of being the victim of those situations to being the victor over those situations.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you can't be a victim to something that you've survived, right? Like, there is so much power in the fact that we're both still alive.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
You're not the victim if you're still around.
That's it. That's
like,
right.
Impossible to accept victimhood if you're still alive, because that means you succeeded. That means you are the victor. And I always look at my life as very much so not a victim. I am absolutely not a victim because I freaking survived. I'm still here.
Yeah. And victors accept what they can't change. And then they use what was bad as a springboard. And that's exactly what you did. And gosh, listening to the impact that you had on a lot of those kids in that job with, was it Rough Track? Is that the organisation name? Yeah. And you talked about a lot of the kids are either on their way to death or on their way to jail. And your organisation and the work that you did, and using dogs as well as companionship for them and teaching them about life, was an absolute intervention right in the middle of that crisis time for them. So can you just share I can't give it the passion that you can, but please tell us more, because working with young people's also been a big mission in my life. And for the very reason I wanted to prevent any young person from going through what I went through. And so I got out there and, I shared and I did and I cared and I did what I could. But tell us what impact you've made, Dave, on those young kids and continue to make.
I think, firstly, the impact on me was greater than the impact on them. I think I received more from the young, damaged humans than I gave. I'm so appreciative of the trust that each young person put in me to go, you know what, I'm handing over to you, Dave, to help guide me, because I give up. What I'm doing is not working, kicked out of home or being dumped from the parentage that the biology gave me, or the system was spitting out, or the system wasn't working for. So there was over 150 kids that came through the programs that I ran, and the success rate was absolutely phenomenal. And I suppose I just used everything that was good that happened to me. So the idea of having a purpose, the idea of having it's okay, I'm going to be here regardless. Doesn't matter what you do to me right now. I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to be here. You can throw everything at me, but I'm not going to dump you. Because the one thing that so many of these kids have had is people that come and go in their lives. There is no continuity. And there's this constant thing of, I'm alone.
Yeah.
No one is going to help me, so I've got to help myself, which of course is one of the reasons that young people get violent, because they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
They carry a knife because they don't feel safe. They do the bravado. They lash out. They hurt others because they don't feel safe themselves. So it's very much so about providing that safety net and saying, hey, I'm not going anywhere. Oh, you calling me a CUNT? Okay, cool. It's all right. You're trying to throw at me. Don't worry. My head's already telling me that. Oh, you too. I bet you your head right now is telling you that you're the most worthless thing in the entire world, because that's what my head tells me too. And then that allows us to connect. So it doesn't matter how many times the kids hit me, kicked me, punched me, stabbed me, tried to attack me, I would just breathe through it, because I related to the pain that they were going through.
Yeah.
And I didn't see an angry child. I saw a hurt child, and there's nothing that I felt other than compassion. So I didn't feel fear.
Yeah.
I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel like I need retribution. I just felt absolute compassion for a young person, be they 11, 13, 16 or 17, that when they're lashing out, just instantly I would melt. And I think that was the secret sauce to what I did. Not only were we giving them purpose through all the different skill building stuff, because of course, when you empower a kid with knowledge, then they feel like they actually have a place that they can stand on. That's not this shifting sand that causes the violence. But they really had a man, because let's face it, men are usually the perpetrators of horrendous hurt towards little humans. The bigger humans are the ones that hurt the little humans. They found a man that wouldn't give up, but also would melt in front of them, not in weakness, but in compassion. And for many of the kids that come through the programs, that's the first time they had a man that would melt in compassion.
Oh.
And they would learn pretty quickly that all they want is just a friggin' hug. They just want a friggin' hug. And I think that's what really set our program success apart, is that when they needed a hug, I was there to hug them. So when they were lashing out and kicking and fighting, I'd say, hey, do you need a hug right now? And then boom, that kid would melt straight into you, Yeah. And it was that melting into compassion that really worked. But I could never do it without the dogs, because the dogs would teach the kids how to melt in compassion. Those beautiful little eyes the dogs have that we all know. The dog's eyes that look at us, and when a dog just leans into you and says, I trust you,
Yeah.
That's the window that was always open for me by the dogs in my program. So I couldn't do all of this stuff that I'm talking about from a big man point of view, looking down to a child, because that's just, unfortunately, I'm a 6'2" guy. I'm 100+ kilos. I'll always be the big scary man to these kids. But the dogs opened up the door where the kid could go, okay, this is okay. I don't need to fight myself anymore.
So the dog was like the facilitator.
100%.
Wow.
They were the keys, unlock all that emotional armor that the kids would put around themselves to protect themselves, and they'd learnt worked. The best defense is offense, right? And kids can learn that from a very, very early age, be it manifesting through manipulation or be it manifesting through just outward violence. They learn from a very, very early age the best defense is offense.
Oh, wow. I love that. I remember when I was working in schools with really troubled teenage girls, and I had a 14-year-old girl in my group that I was running in a program that I'd written, and she'd been expelled from nearly every school on the Sunshine Coast. She'd actually witnessed she was 14, her boyfriend was 19. She'd witnessed his drug overdose, death. She was sexually active, into drugs, alcohol, you name it. And everyone was scared of her. And after a few weeks of me just sitting alongside her and allowing myself to be vulnerable, one day something just switched, and she saw that I genuinely cared and I didn't expect anything from her. And she just started sobbing. And what I saw right there was like a little 5-year-old girl just letting everything out. And I didn't see that aggressive, violent kid that everybody else saw, that nobody, and she said, I just want people to know who I really am. But she had the protective facade up because she'd been just damaged and hurt so much. And inside every one of us is a little kid. I don't think I've really grown up properly yet, but I'm a happy one these days.
I'm a big believer in the idea that every time we had a big traumatic event, we've learnt to cope with that event, and we stay at that age because that's the coping mechanism that worked. A lot of the teenagers that you and I both worked with, I think they're toddlers, right? We see this toddler behavior that comes out in them because that's what worked for them and it's kept working for them. Throwing these teenage tantrums are so reminiscent for, the average person. Well, that looks like a toddler behavior, but they're a teenager. So the damage that they can do and the hurt that can come from their mouths can be so much greater than just a toddler in a supermarket on the floor. So when you look at a young person who is acting out and you look at them like, that's a toddler, what would I do if it's a toddler?
Yeah, that's right.
I would allow them to experience the pain. I would acknowledge the pain, and I would sit with them in their pain. And then I'd ask them if they need a hug. It's just about saying, hey, you have every right to feel this right now. And what really sucks is that you haven't been able to learn this amazing skill of managing these feelings. And that's what I get to do with you from now on. And so once you've had that first big breakthrough, then the trust starts to come. So you're this melting, compassionate big man. And then when you say, hey, I'm here to sit with you in this pain.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I've been through it. I know that you're in it right now. I'm not going to take it away from you by telling a story about me. Like, I very rarely ever have told any of the 150 kids that I've worked with what I've had experience in my life, because they don't give a shit about that. Like, they just care about their pain right now.
Yeah.
But if they ever asked, of course, I'm very open and very honest with them about my journey, but I keep going straight back to them because it is your pain that you're feeling right now. And even if your pain is as simple as someone looked at you, because that's one of the biggest triggers of the teenage boys that I work with, went out and about and someone glanced at them. And that is the reason that they want to kill that person, or they want to then deflect and have a punch on with the other kid in the bus, or they want to lose it at a youth worker, or they want to kick the hell out of a wall. Someone glanced at them. Like, that's the trip point that we're at.
I can identify with that back in the day. Yeah. I thought everybody was looking at me, and I used to get so angry. I'm like, why are you looking at me?
Yes. Like the amount of kids that have lost their shit with me because someone looked at them. And,
Yeah.
outside of the people that deal with addiction and alcoholism, they don't even understand that. Like, what do you mean you're losing your shit because someone looked at you?
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't get it. But when you're a person who has had such extreme trauma, that's all you need as a trigger to lose your shit because your emotional armor is being dug at.
Yeah.
And you've got to, best offense is defense. Don't look at me because looking at me sees me and I don't want you to see me right now. The third part of the program was about then being seen, like allowing the kids to get on stage. And I put kids on Australia's Got Talent. I put kids on national news, on sunrise breakfast programs, on live TV, on the biggest stages in Australia. That was the big next part of the program, is because I know that the trigger is being seen. And again, it's something that I'd forgotten about me. I missed most of grade 12 at a very expensive boarding school, but I missed most of grade 12 because I was so fearful of people looking at me. I hid in the dunnies most of grade 12. If I had to go to a classroom where the door was at the front of the classroom and all the kids were looking that way, I wouldn't go to that class.
Yeah.
I was that petrified.
I get that.
So I get the insight of these kids that don't want to be looked at. So that was my way of dealing with it. It was not flooding the kids. There's very much so these ideas about how it is that you can overcome a trauma. Flooding is not what I'm saying is what we were doing. It's slowly giving them enough power by doing a sport or an activity with their dog, that they're doing that on stage, that it is so natural for them to do something with their dog that they are just focused on one step at a time or one paw at a time with their dog. Oh, there's an audience here as well. And then the joy that that child has. This is a kid, of course, that only a few months before is like, oh, that person looked at me, bah, I'm going to lose my stuff. The joy that they have and the success they have of performing on a stage with their dog, and you just see that all of that trauma has been released.
Yeah.
And this is through doing stuff with a dog and having a big, scary man as their mentor and their guide. And you're just unplucking all of that stuff. And I always talk about it as, the old adage of your glass of water, and it's all got cigarette butts and it's all got dirt and it's got grass and it's got a grime in there. The way that I would run my programs is just pouring new fresh water in, new experiences in, different ways of doing things. Here's a big, scary man that's 6'2", that's 100 kilos, that is not going to hurt you, that is not going to take anything from you. In fact, all he's going to do is give to you. Even if you steal from me, I'm just going to give back to you. So I'm pouring in that new fresh water. I'm not trying to take out the shit that's in their cup. I'm pouring new stuff in. And we did an activity every day that we wouldn't change. It's called circle work. We did it in the morning, we did it in the afternoon, and it was all about reflection and putting numbers on their feelings and where they're at, but also just slowly but surely having more conversation as the circle work would go around, and knowing that it's okay to trust of letting stuff out of yourself. But each evening when we would finish our circle work, we would fill your cup up. So we would go from one person and they would fill the cup up of the next person. What did they do today that impacted me, that made me feel good? Or what did I see them do that I didn't think they were going to do today, but they did it anyway? This filling your cup up idea of fresh water going in.
I love
and very quickly the cup becomes clear, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not about being a psychologist or a psychiatrist and plucking all of the stuff out or itching the scab. Our programs were very much so new experiences that aren't bad. Building them up and having them in this circle of safety net where they know that, yes, it's going to be fucking scary. It is terrifying, but hey, I'm doing it too. We're all doing it together, which again comes back to the antidote for addiction and antisocial behavior is connection. So you've got your dog by your side. That's your dog. You know the steps. You've got this. And I would always be the MC of every performance with the kids. So they trusted all the time that if they were getting a little bit nervous and they needed the support of the crowd, I would get the support of the crowd on their side, and they would always complete it. Of 150 kids through the program, of putting them on national news or putting them on national programs or big stages in each of the capital cities or in country towns, I don't recall a single kid giving up.
Oh, wow. That's phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And these are kids, of course, that couldn't be glanced at when they first come into the program.
Yeah.
They've got the hoodies on, the hats
Yeah.
on, they've usually got glasses on, they've got the vape here. It's about you can't see me,
Yeah.
And then the last part of the program is that then you get to share that and you are an advocate for others, which
Oh,
is kind of we
I
move
love
on
that.
from the filter cup up, that you advocate for another young person and you show them the kindness that has been given to you. Because all of the kids come to us inside a picture frame, right? And in that picture frame that they come to, there is the perpetrator and a victim. And I teach the kids that they're no longer a victim. So oftentimes, and this is the whole, the victim becomes a perpetrator concept that we have, is that oftentimes when you teach a young person that you're no longer the victim, then they see someone who comes into the program that's more vulnerable than they are, then they become the perpetrator. And that
Right.
is so common in the world, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
the victims become the perpetrators because there's only one picture. There's only one picture, and I know what that picture looks like, but I'm not the victim anymore. So I've got to force you to become my victim. Why so many young people from domestic violence situations grow up to also be perpetrators of domestic
Repeat the
violence.
cycle. Yeah.
So I teach young kids that there is a third way.
Great.
That is, we can be in a fellowship in a circle, no one in front, no one behind. We're all equal. We're all in this together. And the best way to do that is to be open and honest and willing with all of your flaws. And that's when you start calling what we say is owning your shit.
Yeah.
So advocating for others and owning your shit.
Oh, I love
A
it.
lot of where is in my program because that's how I've got to communicate with kids because I have to meet them at their level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm not the
Yeah.
perpetrator and the victim. I've got to come down and go, hey, young person, I'm meeting you right here. And that's
Yeah.
why dogs are so good, right? Because dogs are often meeting kids down in the gutter. Because often the kids come to me, they're in the gutter, the dogs are meeting them there. And then they stand up and then they meet me here. And then I go, hey, did you realize right now you're standing on a stage and you're meeting the world? And then
Wow.
when they stop, realize that, and I'll take the microphone away and I'll just say to the kids, while the audience is cheering and clapping about a performance is happening, I just say, suck this in right now. They are cheering for you. They're cheering for you. And then the kids will always say, they're not cheering for us, Dave. They're cheering for you. I'm like, no, they're not. No, they're not. They don't give a shit about me right now. They
That's
only give a
so
shit.
inspirational. I love it. That's so great. And
So that's how the program works.
wow. I was going to ask you what your most rewarding experience has been. I'd say that would probably be it. That'd have to trump being on Big Brother, wouldn't it?
Oh, look, working with a young person that hates the world and hates themselves, and then seeing them love the world and love themselves, and that transformation that can happen in sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes 3 months, sometimes it's taken 3 years.
Yeah.
But that's what gives me purpose. And
Yeah.
that's what gives me meaning to life, is to see that complete change where a young person who had their hoodie like this, had their finger like this, and then they're wearing bright orange clothes. Because all the uniforms my kids would be in were always bright. I want you to be seen. And I would always ask an audience, can you see them? And they would roar with appraisal, because everyone knows the type of kid that I work with, the Eshe that wears black, dark clothing, that wants to look like the grungiest, the dirtiest thing, because that's how they feel in their head. They feel like they affect in the crack of a gutter or the crack of a pavement. They're worse than pom scum in their own head. So they want to act like
Yeah.
that.
That's how I used to feel when I was in my thick of my addiction.
Yep. And
Yeah.
that's their belief. And
Yeah.
that's what they want the world to say. But I'm like, no. I can, no. I'm pouring all this fresh water on you
Yeah.
and washing away all this feeling of shame and shit. And I let you be who I have always seen. And that is this gorgeous little kid. This gorgeous little kid. I'm washing away all this shit, this emotional armor that you've created around yourself. And that is the greatest joy. Like nothing can compare to that. Not climbing in the Himalayas, not coming across Mongolians that have never seen a white person before, not meeting Her Majesty the Queen, not going to the Arctic, not swimming across the greatest rivers in this planet, not doing the Larapinta Trail for the first time in the 1990s, not doing any of those things like falling in love and getting engaged or having your first child. It is seeing that change in a young person where they feel such sadness and being so far down in the scale of 1 to 10 of greatness, and then seeing them change and accept themselves and accept the world and not have hate in their heart anymore. Nothing can compare that. And to do it over 150 times.
Wow. I totally get that. Being able to be a small part in helping change someone else's life for good, no amount of money can buy that joy. And that's
But we
really
do talk about the other thing. I understand.
that's really turning, though. That's really turning our pain into purpose. And my mantra has always been that my pain won't be in vain, but I will use it for other people's gain. And yeah, and that was the formation of Stories of Hope. But how did you do this, Dave? And I know we don't have a lot of time left, and I'd love it if we do a take 2 on all of this as well. Because
I can talk under wet cement, can't I?
Oh, so much to talk about. How did you do it? Because we were talking before about the wearing masks to cover all the shame, getting out there in the big wide world, in denial about what had really gone on in your life, but yet still feeling ashamed underneath. What caused you to put yourself on national television on Big Brother in front of millions of people and then into an environment? Because for me, when I used to wear masks, I would be one person for one group of people, one person for a different group of people. Basically, I'd be whoever I think everybody thought that I should be. And when I'd get into a group of people, I would just be terrified because I would think I don't know who I am and I don't know how to act. So what caused you to put yourself in that situation, and how was the experience in the beginning and how was it after the end?
I suppose that nothing just explodes, right? You know, what does Kamala Harris say, you know, when I just fall out of a coconut tree? I think for me, the first branch I fell down was I had returned to the enslavement. You know, I finished boarding school and I'd gone off to do a jackaroo ship, but my father had gone and collected me from the jackaroo ship and took me back home because he needed his slave. And I was living in very slave-like conditions on my family station. And my girlfriend at the time and my best mate at the time was like, you've got to get out, you know, you've got to get out. Like you know, 7 days a week, you're working 20 odd hours a day, you know, sometimes 3 and 4 days, you don't stop working because it's planting or it's because it's harvest. And again, I didn't see a problem with that. Like that was just absolutely normal for me. And, you know, when all the other jackaroos or station hands, they would have time off. Well, I was always told that it's like, well, I'm the son, so I have to do it. Like, you know, so I never thought that there was an option or an ulterior or an alternative. But then my friends and my girlfriend were like, no. So we stole a car and we took off, and where else do you go but to Sydney, right? You know, so
Yeah.
we headed off to Sydney, and because you know that's the worst place in the world to go, because that's what everyone says. Sydney is just this horrendous, horrid place, you know, as it was in the 1990s, and this cesspool. But we got down here, and it was pretty fun. It was a cool city, and it was crazy for us young bush kids, and that had been really, I suppose, sheltered from the world at boarding school and growing up on stations. But look, lots of modelling scouts spoke to me, and it was really bizarre. It was very much so out of the movie stuff. And I was convinced by my friends that if another modelling scout came up to me, that I should do it. And, you know, I was a very, very hardcore Christian back then. And then I spoke to God and I said, oh, God, if you want me to do this, I'll do it. And then literally right then, a modelling scout came up and from an Italian company and said, oh, you know, have you ever thought about it? And I'm like, oh, God, here we go. Okay, well, I'll just do it. And then so I did end up going and taking that jump of moving to Europe and doing modelling. So the step to Big Brother was not the biggest one in the world because I already had this idea of I can leave the farm. And that's when I ran off with my mates. It was only for you know, less than a week. But then, you know, then going to Europe and modelling, and then after that, then travelling the world as a backpacker. I spent about a year travelling to 50 or 60 countries, all on the smell of an oily rag, going all the way up to the Arctic and across, all the deserts, the Middle East, all of Europe, all the former Soviet Union, all of Asia, right up to the mountains of Tibet, the steppes of Mongolia.
Gosh.
So, I'd done so much of these things. So I suppose when I'd accidentally come across Big Brother auditions, just by a twist of fate, got stuck in Brisbane at the university where they were doing the auditions, it was just a natural thing for me to go, oh, yeah, I'll give this a go. Because that curiosity that was so inside me, which was always wanting to know more, just led me to that pathway. And I kind of turned off the idea of doing the show, but then I got beaten to a pulp by a gang of blokes in Brisbane. And that's when I realised, holy shit, I don't want to wear this mask anymore, because being a very actively normal looking bloke, no one really would have ever thought that I was gay. So it was never a problem for me, just on appearances, people thinking that I was gay as I was in my 20s.
And you were beaten up?
Yeah, left for dead. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Kicked absolute shit out of my 6 guys.
Oh, gosh.
And then so that was when I was like, well, here's my chance to change the world by going on Big Brother and actively having a conversation with everyone who sits down and watches that show and go, I am not here to hurt you. I'm a gay man and I'm not here going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason I went on the show, was not for be famous, not to get on Neighbours, but was to have a conversation with every straight gay. I'm not going to hurt you. Can I just live my life?
Yeah.
Because there is that third thing, right? Like, I'm not a victim. I'm not a perpetrator. I can be your equal. Just treat me as an equal person. And of course, Australia has come a long way since 2006. I'm now considered an equal person. And who would have thought in 2006 that a gay man could be a youth worker? I mean, back then, and not long before that, you were easily fired from a job because there was a conflation between anything that wasn't heterosexual and horrendous things towards children. But of course, now we know that that's not fact, because we've come a long way with regards to acceptance. And I think having that conversation on a show where 2 to 3 million people would actively watch had a big part in that. And that, I think the answer to your question is just that innate curiosity in me, that idea of, well, what if I did this? And that comes back, I think, from that serenity prayer. Have the courage to change the things that I can.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Walking out onto that behind the screen on the biggest live TV show in the world at that time.
Right. Yeah.
It was just having the courage and feeling the fear of doing it anyway.
Wow. One question I've just wondered about, and it's a bit of sounds superficial now after everything that you've just shared, but being in that house, were you actually aware as you went about the day, not doing the challenges obviously, but the day-to-day living conversation, did you kind of forget that you were being filmed? Was it like...
You forget being filmed by day 3.
By day 3. And so it's just like you're living in a normal house with flatmates and you got no filter, you just say or do whatever you want really, and you forget, wow, okay.
Yeah, well, for me, absolutely, that was my experience. Within 3 days, it had all gone. The noradrenaline comes out of your system. You're no longer, on the stage with thousands of people in the live audience, and you're not aware of all the cameras because they're all hidden. And once you're in the house, it was absolutely by day 3. And I suppose the way that I can liken it for anyone that hasn't done a reality TV show is, when you're at a cafe and you're having a conversation with your close friend, and it's a very, very personal conversation, and there's a table of people less than 2 meters away and another table another 2 meters away, and you're having these very intimate conversations, and yet there's all these people that can hear, but we selectively as humans block them out because we're having this intimacy and this connection right now. So I think for me, I very much so just was connecting with those people that were in front of me. And I think that the reason that Australians or anyone that watches reality TV particularly connect with people on the screen is those that forget the cameras are there and ignore the cameras are there. And it's no different to the friendships that we have in the real world, is when people let their guards down and just have that connection with you, you feel connected to them and you want to hang out with them more and more. So I think that's the difference between those that get kicked off reality TV shows early and those that have a longevity on the reality screens is you just want that authentic person. And that's the same as in our connections with people, right? Like we
Yeah.
just want that authentic.
Yeah, good answer. As we kind of coming to a close now, Dave, what's been your greatest light bulb moment?
I think the greatest light bulb moment for me was what is the worst that can happen? Like, what is the worst that can happen? And I remember being in a very, very outback part of, there's a lot of experiences that you have that lead up, that culminate to this one experience. And I suppose I'd have many of these experiences at boarding school because I had a very, very violent years of particularly the grade 10 through to grade 12, very, very violent experiences at school, boarding school. So the experience was that I was on an outback station with my dad and my mum, and my dad had grabbed a Stilton, which is a big, large metal wrench that probably weighs about 5 kilos, a big, long wrench, and he had it in his hand. And I remember just dropping to my knees and just accepting that this is something that I can't win and I can't fight. And it's like, what's the worst that can happen? The pain will be over. Like he can hit me 3 or 4 times in the head. And yes, the first and the second's going to hurt, but I know by the third, the pain's going to be over. And this horrific situation that I found myself in, yeah, that's the worst that can happen, that it might take 3 blows for him to kill me. So yeah, that was the light bulb moment for me, was when I think it was 21. What's the worst that can happen? And that has been terrific throughout my life. Like going on Dancing with the Stars, what's the worst that can happen? 2.5 million people that are watching are going to think that I can't dance. A few hundred people in this live audience are going to laugh at me. Okay, let's do this.
Oh, that's great. Because when we do go to that, what's the worst that can happen? It then removes the fear, doesn't it?
It just goes away.
Yeah.
When a kid got a shiv and they've got the shiv and they're going to stab me, what's the worst that can happen? That shiv, it's 4 inches long. It's going to stab me. I'm half an hour maximum from a hospital.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? Then I can be a compassionate human being to that kid with a shiv. What's the worst that can happen when my order's wrong and I ask for it to be rectified? What's the worst that can happen? The person gets the shits and looks at me and thinks that I'm a Karen.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Doing this podcast with you, what's the worst that can happen? The connectivity breaks down. I get sweaty because the only quiet place for me is inside my van, and that's the worst that can happen. So let's just get on with it and do it.
Oh, and we're nearly over. But there's been so much. I've just loved hearing your stories so much, and they've been so impactful.
But before we go on, I want that's my light bulb moment. What's yours? I want to know your light bulb moment.
Do you know, mine was very similar to what you just said. When I hit, I've had 3 rock bottoms in my life, but I would say that the third was 7 years ago, after I'd watched both my parents die of terminal illnesses. And then just after that, my husband became really sick and had to give up his job and had a breakdown, and my son moved to Sydney for work, so I was kind of an empty nester then. My daughter had moved out and got married, a few years before that. And then we had to have my dog put down as well, that I'd had for 16 years, and just one trauma on top of another. And I felt so lonely. People had always perceived me as being the person that didn't need any help, because I've always been the caring person out there in the community for everyone else, the counsellor, the person that other people come to. And so then when I was suffering the most, I was the most lonely. And I really hardly had anybody check in to see if I was okay. And so I had a light bulb moment in a conference that I dragged myself out after 6 weeks of knowing that I was really slipping in my mental health, and I dragged myself out to be with people. We talked about communication before, connection, and I knew that it was vital for me to connect right at that moment, because if I didn't, I would probably drink again. And so in that conference, I just had this massive light bulb moment about listening to the stories of 3 other people that had come out the other side of hard times, of all the things that I'd come out the other side of since childhood. And I realised like you are, that I really was a person of resilience, and that if I couldn't find that person that I could reach out to and know who could tell me that it was going to be okay, well, I was going to become that person for everybody else, or for someone else, for the ones. I thought if I could share my stories and gather the many people that I knew that had also come out the other side of hard times, then maybe we can help change our community. And then my dream was maybe Australia and maybe the world. And the fear of public humiliation that I had always suffered as a result of great bullying and just feeling the shame of everything that I'd been through, the fear of not achieving my dreams and stepping out became so much greater than the fear of doing it. So mine was, what's the worst thing that can happen? I can set out to start these events and maybe one person might turn up. And I thought, well, if one person turns up, I'm going to share my vision with that one person. And 30 people walked through the room that night. And as I stood there, with tears streaming down my face, I just felt I found my purpose, and fear's not going to stop me anymore. And since that day where I dealt with that, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I also dealt with, around that time, the rape that had happened to me. I'd been carrying shame till I was in my early 50s for that, because I never told anyone. And the day that I dealt with that and dealt with that greatest fear, that was the day that I found freedom to totally 100% authentically be myself and not care what anyone thought about me. And obviously, you care what your family thinks, but as far as feeling judged by people, I thought I've been judged my whole life by people and I'm okay. And so I'm going to use my stories regardless of what anyone thinks, because if I can help change one person's life, then it's all worth it. That was mine.
Is that cool that we've got the same light bulb moment? Like that's
No, I thought how ironic that's I've really resonated with what you said. Really, because fear's been the biggest thing that I've battled with my entire life. And it's still in my sobriety so often just tries to smash through the door of my brain. And it's the thing that I continually spend most of my waking moments fighting off and hitting back on. But I've really learnt today that we can't help what comes into our head, but the second it comes in, that's when we have the power to do something about it. And the second that we give it a second thought, it's got a foothold in our mind once again. And so it's been a really hard battle doing life sober as far as the fear and the triggers go. But I've learnt the skills today to be able to keep it at bay and to not let it rule and govern my life and stop me from doing the things that I desire to do the most.
And I think anyone who's listening right now that wonders about sobriety, the difference between living a sober life and a non-sober life is when you're sober, you actively have to feel every single feeling that comes your way. That's the difference. That's the only difference.
It's a big difference.
We're not giving up the party. We're not giving up the fun. We're not giving up any of that stuff. What we're doing is we are actively and consciously accepting that we will deal with every feeling that comes our way, because what we do as humans is anything and everything not to feel, which is bizarre, right? But that's what's
right. We take our feelings.
What is all sobriety talk? It's we are choosing to feel and only feel. And just because we're sober doesn't mean that we still don't do things to avoid our feelings. Like you and I are both still drinking coffee, right?
Yeah.
That is a way that we manage our feelings, but it's managing your feelings and pushing feelings away without the detriment to yourself or others.
Yeah.
And most of our addictions, even a work addiction, can harm ourselves and others. And what you spoke about, your last rock bottom, and what my rock bottom was burnout. What you explained was burnout. That idea that no one can do what I can do and only I can do it, and I am so fucking alone right now. And everything, all the responsibility is on me. That's, I think, burnout. And I think that's what you experience, with your son and your husband's issue and losing your parents and your daughter not being there, is this idea that you were just completely burned out and there is absolutely nothing left.
Yeah.
And that's what got through this sobriety, is the idea that I burned the hell out, like hurricane of my own making, and I had nothing left, no ability whatsoever. And what I've learned from that is my fear is my fuel. I just have to be in the driver's seat like I am right now. And when I have fear, I've just got to use that fuel and just keep fucking going. And sometimes the only thing to do is to keep going in a straight line, not grab the wheel. You know, I've had a terrible car accident where I grabbed the wheel and flipped my vehicle several times. I know what that's like, to twist the wheel. And whereas sometimes you've just got to feel that fear and use it as your fuel, because it's going to come anyway. And people that are not sober will do things like alcohol or an adrenaline sport, or be a narky bitch, or anything to divert that feeling so you don't have to feel that feeling, or reject someone who is really open and honest with you. You reject them and are a callous cow. These are things that non-sober people do, whereas a sober person feels those feelings and is open, honest, and willing.
Yeah, dealing, and as they say in the 12-step rooms, we are dealing with life on life's terms.
Yeah, we're not ignoring it and going, right, I need to crash myself right now because I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
And so many people, I need a wine. I can't deal with this. I need a wine. That's what we're talking about. Is in sobriety, we don't get to do that. We don't get to have a wine. We don't get to do a line. We don't get to roll a spliff. We don't get to do any of those things because we choose actively to feel every feeling. And as we're suggesting, I think pretty loudly,
Yeah,
is we fear and we do it anyway.
we do it afraid. Oh, Dave, it's been an awesome catch up with you. And gosh, we'll have to do a second episode, because we could go on for hours, but you're melting in the car. So, and I was going to ask you about what's next, but how about we keep that for next time we catch up? Thanks.
Yeah. What did Farmer Dave do after he is no longer working with hundreds of young, violent and vulnerable teenagers in Western Sydney? Stay tuned.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned for episode 2.
I'll give you a massive hint. It's called Working on Myself.
Yeah, love that. Love that.
It's called absolutely loving myself sick. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm just gonna leave people with that. That's exactly. But how that looks and what that looks like, yeah, let's discuss that next time.
Yeah, and we'll finish on this. Everybody always says to everybody, don't they? First thing, oh, what do you do? But the better question is not what do you do? Tell me about you, because our worth isn't, and our identity should not be wrapped up in what we do. Hey, we are people, we are humans, and we are valued regardless of what we do.
Can I say the biggest failure that I have had as a big man, as a guide, as a supporter, as a youth worker, as a boss, the lie that I have told everyone that comes into my sphere is, don't tell me where you're from or what you've done or who your parents were. Show me what you're doing. And that's the great lie. That's the great lie. And that's my failure as a big man to little people.
Right.
I had all of my worth was in what I'm doing right now. Everything, all of my value was wrapped up in what I'm doing right now. And when that stopped, that was my burnout. That was my black hole. I'm like, well, who am I? What am I? I have no value. I have no worth because I'm doing nothing right now. Therefore, that is my value. That is my worth. Nothing.
Wow.
So that's the great lie. So I'm glad that you finished on this, because
that's what I wanted to finish on, because
the biggest lie.
Wow. And I finished on that because I'll just share this quickly. Oh, gosh, we could be going on for 3 hours. When my hubby had his burnout, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, but I am anyway, I said, you'll have to give up your job, because he was in such a bad way physically and mentally. And he actually started crying, and he said, if I give up my job, I won't know who I am. And I thought, wow, it really was heartbreaking to hear that. And I said, you're not your job. You know, you're a beautiful human, you know, with a just a great heart, and, you know, just being you offers so much to the world. And it's a scary question, especially for guys, that question, what do you do? Because like you said, so many, when they don't do anything, all of a sudden they feel that in the eyes of the world that they're a failure and they're worthless, and that nothing could be further from the truth.
Why is it that so many men commit suicide? And I think we might find the answer in exactly what you've just said.
Yeah. Gosh, we've got to definitely do a second interview soon. Oh, I love your work, Dave. You're such an inspiration and such a wonderful example of our Aussie culture, and caring and compassionate, and I could go on. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being open, honest, and willing to have this chat. I really appreciate it, and I hope your listeners have got something out of it.
I'm sure they will. And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for listening to Humans of Hope Inspiring Stories with Kerry Atherton. If this conversation helped you, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend or leave a rating and review on your podcast player. Thank you to Matthew Bliss for podcast production and consultation, and to Kintsugi Heroes for making this podcast possible. If you'd like to find out more about Kerry Atherton, head to storiesofhope.com.au, where you can purchase her books or find out where her next event is taking place. Check the show notes for links and information about our guest in this episode. And remember, you don't have to walk your path alone.